I'm a Gallup Certified Strengths Coach, and all that really means is that I love to help individuals and teams unleash their true potential by leaning into their natural strengths, and I get to do that using a Clifton Strengths Finder assessment. Today, what we're going to do is not really talk about that assessment or individual strengths, but really just I'm going to provide for you all a summary of some really interesting data and conclusions that Gallup has come up with during this time. All right. So our agenda for today is really, we're going to talk a little bit about what employees or people are experiencing, what they are expecting from their leaders. We're actually going to break this group up into rooms, little small groups, and where you can come up with some new ideas and share some best practices. And then we'll close out the day with a group share. So all of the data that we share today is not data that I've compiled, it's data that Gallup has compiled, and is an amalgam of articles and conclusions and pieces that they've written over the past few weeks. And you'll get the source data for all of that at the end. All right. So we're going to start out just really quickly with a Zoom poll. So Amanda is going to pull up on the screen for you a list of 5 questions to answer. And I'll just ask you all to take a few moments to answer these questions. And they are simply, in thinking about the recent impact of coronavirus on your job, indicate your level of agreement or disagreement with each of the following statements. Okay. And we'll take a minute for everybody to answer those questions. And Amanda, if you'll give me a chat. And a good question, Rob Renzi, if you are leadership, answer it for what you think it is based on what you've been doing over the last couple of weeks. Okay, we will move forward. We'll talk about a little bit more through our time today about what these questions mean. But before we do that, let's take a trip back to the last kind of 5 weeks and what has happened in our world over the last 5 weeks since March 11th. And, I think, the shot heard around the world, March 11th was kind of a big day, and there's a lot of talk prior to that, but Tom Hanks announcing, his positive diagnosis, the NBA suspending their season, I think for me personally, those were those moments where, wait a second, this is real, right? What is going on right now? The next day, right before Florida State took the court, ACC tournament was suspended. It was a few days later that the entire NCAA tournament was suspended. That Friday, Leon County Schools and FSU FAMU TCC announced an extra week to spring break, right? So people weren't coming back till March 30th. 12 days after that, Leon County shelter in place and curfew came to order. A week after that, Governor DeSantis issued the statewide safer at home order. So a lot happened in a very short period of time. And those first few weeks of March, likely you were spent planning for business continuity, how to operate what happens, how do we keep our business afloat and moving forward? A lot of things talking about your home continuity. Now my kids are home. How do I keep their school going? Where do I get toilet paper, soap, right? You think about your home life. New technology, right? Zoom became a household term, right? Like Kleenex. And, where's the mute button, right? Or where's the video button, depending upon what application I'm using today. Jobs were changing, roles shifting. And likely all of this kind of uncertainty started to settle down a little bit as we're all getting used to kind of a new world and a new way to operate. But I think, it's time now to really reflect and think back to what's been going on and how we as leaders have been handling that and what are some things we need to be thinking about. So, Gallup has been a study of human behavior for decades, right? And what Gallup found is 2 surveys we're going to cite here from March 13th and 16th, kind of right near the beginning of when things started to get really crazy, and then March 27th and 29th. And just want to highlight a couple items. The percentage of full-time employees who said that COVID-19 disrupted their life a great deal or fair amount went from 58% to 81% in that 2-week period of time. 40% of folks surveyed said their employers froze hiring or reduced their hours or shifts because of COVID-19, and that was up from 33% and 27% respectively. So these things increased in that two-week period of time. The percentage of full-time employees working from home because of COVID-19 went from 33% to 61% in that period of time. And the percentage of parents working full-time who kept their kids at home from school because COVID-19 increased from 44% to 100%. That is every single person surveyed. Every single parent surveyed has kids at home. Right? And I think it's important to look at these stats on a global scale, just because it gives you just snapshots of what people are thinking. And there's a lot of change and a lot of uncertainty in a very short period of time. And questions are on people's minds. Who's essential? Am I essential, right? If I'm essential and I'm public facing, how dangerous is that for me, right? How important is that? Will school come back? If school comes back, will I send my kids? If my job changes and the office opens back up, do I go back? Do I want to go back, right? There's a lot of questions on people's minds. I think it's important sometimes to just sit back and think about that data and what it means. But what Gallup found, is, and really Gallup's been studying this, studying people's perceptions and behavior over the last 80 years. And there's been a lot of crises in the last 80 years, from the Great Depression, Pearl Harbor, World War II, 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis. All of these things has happened in the last 80 years. And what Gallup has found is that there's 4 universal needs that people need from their leaders: trust, compassion, stability, and hope, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about each of these 4 categories. But this is what folks are looking to leaders for. Do they trust what they're hearing? Is that person compassionate about my needs and understanding of my needs? Is there a stability that's being offered or communicated? And what hope is there, right? Is there hope, or is there an end result to all of this that we can rally around and we can get behind? And when these 4 things are met, what Gallup has noticed is they describe what's called the rally effect, and where people can get really engaged and start to dig in to solving the problems and moving forward. Okay? So let's talk about each of these categories because these 4 themes do apply today. First thing to realize about trust, and Gallup, they don't only do political polls, but they do a lot of polls on the American workplace or the workplace of today and what's happening. And one of the things that they found overall is that, look, we're starting from a trust deficit. Only 1 in 3 people worldwide agree that they trust the leadership of their organization, right? That's without a crisis. Only 13% of US employees strongly agree that their company leadership communicates effectively. So if that's the normal, right, across the board, we're starting from a trust deficit. So in a time of crisis, it becomes really important, right? Critically important, and things to think about. How are you being predictable in an unpredictable scenario? Just personally, the conversations that we're having at our workplace, what if there's so many if thens, right? It becomes overwhelming, right? Because it is unpredictable, and then a new thing happens, right? That you didn't think about. So how can you be predictable in an unpredictable scenario? Employees or folks that we're leading are looking for honesty and clarity. If you don't know, it's okay. Don't know, right? But let's work on it together, right? So that's what they're looking for. And people are wondering, everybody's wondering, like, how is a health crisis and an economic crisis going to impact my future, right? What will I be able to do when, we all talk about the new norm, but what is that? And what does that really mean? So we've got to be able as leaders to communicate and hit on these things that people are wondering about and thinking about. Perception is reality, and we've all heard that, and these are the perceptions. So how we as leaders deal with that becomes really important. Moving forward to compassion, right? Your people, your staff, your teams, the people you work alongside have new responsibilities, new challenges, new fears, right? I didn't have to worry about my home internet connection and how good that was until a couple weeks ago, right? I didn't have to be concerned how many devices I had in my house, but now I have 6 people needing a device at the same time, right? These are new challenges, new responsibilities, and we're all navigating that. How compassionate are we being and understanding are we being about that? Overall, one of the things that Gallup studies a lot is employee engagement. And employee engagement is highly correlated to relationships that individuals have with their coworkers and with the feeling that managers care about their personal well-being, right? And that's really important. Everything you're reading nowadays, hey, when you start your Zoom meetings, let's start out with, how are you doing, right? How's everybody doing? And for some of you, that may be very natural. Some of you are always starting out with, how are you doing? For others, that may be a very foreign thing to ask. It might be getting too personal, but it becomes really critical in demonstrating compassion. The one piece I'll put up here, your policy decisions that you make communicate compassion as well, right? And verbal compassion without policy compassion does not go unnoticed. So just as an example, it's one thing to say you care about somebody, but when your actions are showing that you care, allowing flexible scheduling, allowing evening hours so people can take care of kids during the day, those are policy decisions that show compassion. And be sure to make sure that those are aligned, right? Stability. There's two types of stability to think about: practical stability and psychological stability. And practical stability really is, do you have the materials and equipment you need to do your job, right? What do you have what you need to be effective, right? And since your office has changed, right? Maybe you're working from home. Do you have what you need to be stable and be effective in that environment? Psychological stability is more about, do I know where the organization is headed? Will I be okay, right? Are we going to be okay as people, right? That's the difference between practical and psychological stability. And as leaders, it's incumbent on us to make sure that we're hitting on both, right? What are the decision-making principles, right? And how are you communicating those as leaders, right? Are you making decisions just based on what hits the newspaper that day? Or do you have a set of guiding principles? I'm telling my staff on a regular basis, like, the two things we care about right now is stay safe and help people, right? In that order, but not far behind. So stay safe, help people. And now you can start to answer questions. If somebody comes to the door and needs something, well, how can you help them but stay safe? Okay, I can call them on the phone. Great. Exercising judgment, but do your teams know where your principles are and how you're making decisions on a regular basis? So what does that mean for you and your organization, or whom you're leading? And then how are you measuring and communicating progress frequently? There are so many changing things that are happening, and there are so many plans being put in place. Remember to communicate that progress on a regular basis so people see the direction that they're going, right? So that they know, again, continuing to build that trust and continue to create an environment that promotes that psychological and practical stability. And last, hope. You know, I love to tell people, look, hope is not a strategy, and it is not a strategy, but it is an important ingredient to success, right? It's a critical ingredient to success. Hope inspires commitment, prompts performance, and hope is built on trust and stability. You know, how are you laying out goals and how you're giving folks the confidence and the ability to achieve those goals gives individuals hope and the desire to achieve, right? So with these four things that people are looking to leaders for, hope, compassion, stability, trust, these questions that we asked in our Zoom poll are really the 5 elements that Gallup has said, 5 questions or 5 elements that can help you gauge your progress in meeting those 4 needs. And this is a survey that you can send out today. You can send this exact survey out to your team today, and you can get a feel for, hey, how do people think about that? So there's a question in the chat box that came out, well, what if I'm the leader? How do I answer these questions, right? It's interesting to see how you would answer these questions versus how your teams will answer these questions, right? And as you guys know, as a leader, it's always important. Your own perception is one thing, but the most important perception is those of the perception of those around you. Is your message getting across? So let's look at these questions in a couple more, in a little bit more detail. And I'll share with you, Gallup sent out this survey between March 13th and 16th, and again on March 27th and 29th. And here's what they saw in that period of time, and thinking back to what we experienced as a community. So leadership has a clear plan. 37% strongly agreed March 13th through 16th. 52% strongly agreed March 27th through 29th. Definitely a positive place to go, right? And what you would expect, I would hope, as leaders are helping navigate their teams through these difficult times. I feel well prepared to do my job, from 55% to 52% 2 weeks later. So makes you wonder, like, well, that's essentially unchanged, but a slight decrease, but a lot changed in that period of time, right? I may have felt well prepared to do my job on March 13th when I was working in the office, but now 2 weeks later, I'm working at home with a different device, spotty internet connection, a slow VPN. I'm not as prepared today as I was yesterday, right? So it's definitely something to think about, and how we're addressing that as leaders can be really important. My leader keeps me informed. 47% strongly agreed March 13th through 16th. 54% strongly agreed 27th through 29th. Look, this data tells us, I think tells us that the role of a leader in navigating change is really, really critical, but also so is the role of the supervisor. Who has that number one contact with the entire organization? Sometimes that's the CEO, sometimes that's the frontline manager, and are both speaking the same language, and that can become really important. Also, it's an opportunity to get back to the basics. Like, when was the last time we set expectations? What are we looking to achieve? How are we looking to achieve it? And you can't assume that everybody has navigated that change and come out on the back end with the same thought in mind. Okay. So for the last two questions, organizations care about my well-being. 45% strongly agreed and 49% strongly agreed a couple weeks later. So definitely some opportunity for improvement. Please always remember that well-being is multidimensional. There's social well-being, financial well-being, community well-being. There's a lot of different elements to that, but how are you as a leader kind of, addressing those in your day-to-day? And then the last question, social distancing. 22% on March 13th through 16th were always social distancing, and 51% March 27th through 29th for social distancing. And you would expect that with all of the statewide and countywide orders coming in, but don't forget your role as a leader, right, in promoting that. If you have a workspace, or how are you reminding your folks that now's not the time to go easy, now's not the time to relax, right? These measures need to continue moving forward. In our community in the last week, we've seen a letter from Tallahassee Memorial Healthcare CEO asking, telling us to continue to do this. The same has happened at Archbold up in Thomasville. So people are saying, even if you're not seeing it, keep doing what we're doing. And you, as the leader of your little community, right, need to continue that same message as well, to continue driving those up. So that gives you a little insight into what those 5 questions and how they're related to the 4 kind of key things that folks are looking for: trust, compassion, stability, and hope. What we're going to do next, right, is we're going to split this group up into breakout rooms. And you're going to be put into one of 4 breakout rooms just on each of these elements. So one breakout room will be focused on trust, one will be focused on compassion, one on stability, and one on hope. And we're going to give you about 7 minutes to work together as a group and talk, share, here are the best practices that I'm doing in my organization, or that I'm seeing in my organization, that we're doing specifically to build trust and to make sure that our teams trust where we're going and what we're doing. Here are the things that we're doing to show compassion, both policy-wise and behavioral-wise or verbal-wise. Really a great opportunity to share what you're doing, but also take a moment to throw in some new ideas, something that came out at you as you were listening to this or seeing this data. Here's something I'd like to start doing tomorrow, right? And let's share that. Amanda is putting a link in the chat for a Google Doc. It's no fewer than 7,000 characters, so you'll have to copy and paste that into your browser window. But we created a shared Google Doc, and when you get into your room, your first order of business is just have one person volunteer to be the scribe and open up that Google Doc and capture your team's notes in your specific quadrant that you see here. And this is exactly what the document that you'll see will look like. At the end of today, when this is all done, we'll pretty it all up and we'll send it out to everyone. So everyone on this call can have the benefit of the best practices and the ideas that each group has shared. Okay. So when Amanda opens up the breakout rooms, you will get a little notice on your screen that says join the blank breakout room, either trust, compassion, stability, or hope. That'll tell you which one you're in. Also, when you're in your breakout room, if you look at the top left of the window banner, you'll see the name of the breakout room you're in if you forget. We will ask you to join that breakout room. We will give you a couple time prompts when there's 2 minutes left, 1 minute left. And then when we close the breakout rooms, we'll ask everybody to come back into the main meeting room, and we'll ask your scribe to just give a high-level synopsis and share quickly what came of your meeting today. Okay? All right. So with that, Amanda, if you'll open up the breakout rooms, and when you get there, just everybody turn your you can get off mute at that time. Okay? Welcome back, everybody. All right, so that was fast. We realize that. What I'll ask, we've got just a couple minutes left. I would like to just ask the scribe from each group to share one thing that you think is really important for the group to know, keeping in mind that we're going to send out this document that you see on the screen to everybody. Okay, we'll send this out to everybody so everybody can kind of gain the full benefit of what everybody had. So let me start with the compassion group. Who was the scribe there?
This is Leslie. I was the scribe for a really active group. They had lots to offer and share. And I think I'm actually, if I'm going to take a little flexibility and kind of roll everything into one, the big thing was communication, that communicating, showing flexibility, and having lines of communication opened. I think that's the theme that runs through all of these things, is that regardless of what the problem is, just making sure people know that you're available, finding ways to have those daily communications that you might have, that you can't have spontaneously anymore, and just really making sure that there's that constant flow of communication and openness about willingness to talk about whatever the issue might be. I hope my team feels like I summed that up.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Leslie. Moving down to the hope quadrant, who is the scribe there?
Hi, that was Rochelle. If I could sum it up quickly, it was just communication, communication, communication. I'm seeing that the community come together, the cultural organizations, the nonprofits, videos from CEOs assuring that things will go back to normal, or just a simple communication via email that indicates hope for the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Rochelle. Stability? You're on. Oh, and we started a new thing. The new sign for telling people they're on mute is this.
Sorry. Our group talked about what it means in their lives for stability right now, keeping as much normalcy as possible, keeping the workday in its original format, not changing it too much. And then one other thing was daily meetings and check-ins were super important for our group.
Awesome. Really good, Lexi. Thank you. And then trust. Who was the scribe for trust?
Christina.
Hey, Christina.
And so I took notes, but I could not figure out Google Docs on the fly. But we talked about trust, and that trust leads and builds to the other three, compassion, hope, and stability. And that working from home also puts a test on the trust because of the lack of communication. And that trust is reinforced based on the behavior of the organization in the past.
Very good. So those of you who, I saw people continuing to type in the Google document, and that's fine. We're not going to pull the data down until a little later today. So if you have some things that you're continuing to finish up, please just finish them up in the next 10, 15 minutes, in the next hour or so, just knock it out. But we will go ahead and send that document out to everybody who joined the call today. We do have a quick, we're only 45 minutes, but I will just pop one more thing up on the screen. There is, a great kind of article that Gallup has put together, Evolving COVID-19 Responses of the World's Largest Companies, that has a lot of other ideas included in that as well. We will send out some resources at the end with links to the articles where the content from today's session came from. So you will all have that. So don't worry about trying to take screenshots or Google things. We'll send that all out to each of you. But I just want to say thank you all for joining today and truly appreciate your contributions. I know it's a fast 45 minutes and we threw a lot out at you, but you'll get a lot in return as well in the back end. Communication absolutely is number one, and think really deeply about what it is you're communicating that's building trust, compassion, stability, and hope. What is it that you're providing out there to the folks that you are leading? A final question for you all to share in the chat as we kind of close down today. Although our world has been turned upside down and is very different than it was just a few short weeks ago, there has been a lot of great shared and displayed in our community. So as we close out the session, I'd ask you just to throw one comment in the chat box to everybody. What is something amazing that you've seen in our Tallahassee community that would give all of us here the hope and the energy and the drive to keep moving forward and get through this together? So with that, I want to say thank you very much. I'll leave the sources up on the screen if you want to Google a couple of those articles and bookmark those pages. Otherwise, you will get them all at the end. So thank you, and thank you, Leadership Tallahassee, for the opportunity to kick off this Tallahassee Leads Here webinar. Barbara, Amanda, Rebecca, thank you. And thank you all for coming today. Appreciate it.